What if the history we believe in is just a meticulously constructed lie? What if a people erased from memory suddenly rise from the darkness to reclaim justice? There are stories that go beyond our wildest imaginations, stories of survival, courage, and a thirst for justice so intense that it can change an entire galaxy. Look at this ship. It's not flashy, it's not modern, but it carries the weight of a buried past and a future full of hope. Today, we're going to explore a story like that. A story that's not just science fiction, but also a mirror reflecting the deepest aspirations of humanity. We'll learn about the rise of humanity, a people thought to have vanished from the universe, but who unexpectedly appear to confront a powerful empire. Have you ever felt helpless, underestimated, or even forgotten? Have you ever craved an opportunity to prove yourself, to reclaim what is rightfully yours? Before diving into the details of the war between humanity and the Dominion, let's reflect a bit on the revenge stories we love and why they have such a powerful appeal. From the avenging warriors in Greek mythology to the revenge heroes on the big screen, we are always captivated by stories of revenge. Why is that? Perhaps it's because we yearn for a just world where the wicked pay for their sins. But the story of humanity's rise is not just a simple revenge tale. It is also a story about survival, sacrifice, and rebirth. Let's explore this story together and draw valuable lessons for ourselves. As we've just seen, revenge scenes always have a strange allure. From the vengeful bride in Kill Bill to Maximus in Gladiator or Arya Stark in Game of Thrones, we are all drawn to characters who dare to stand up against injustice, reclaiming what was lost. But why is that? Why do we crave stories of revenge so much? Perhaps, deep down, each of us has a yearning for justice, a desire to see the wicked pay for their sins. Think about Gladiator. Maximus was a brilliant general, a model man, but he was betrayed and lost everything. When he stood up to fight, not only for himself, but also for honor, for the innocent who had fallen, we feel a deep sense of empathy. We want him to win, to avenge those who have passed. Similarly, in Kill Bill, we witness a woman who was betrayed, robbed of her happiness, and even her life, but she didn't give up. She overcame every difficulty, every challenge to avenge those who caused her suffering. And when she succeeds, we feel a strange satisfaction, an emotional release. But revenge stories aren't just about simple emotional release. They are also a mirror reflecting the darker aspects of humanity. They show us that, sometimes, the line between justice and revenge is very thin, and that revenge can lead to unforeseen consequences. So what's the lesson here? That a yearning for justice is a good thing, but we need to be careful with the negative emotions that can arise in the process of seeking justice. That revenge can bring temporary satisfaction, but it cannot heal the wounds of the heart. And the story of humanity's rise is a story like that. A story about a people erased from history, but who did not give up hope. A story about revenge, but also about rebirth and building a better future. To better understand this story, let's explore the Dominion Empire, humanity's sworn enemy, and the mistakes that led to their downfall. To understand why humanity was able to defeat the Dominion, we need to look at the very nature of this empire. The Dominion wasn't simply a brutal force, but a society built on absolute control and a belief in the superiority of its own race. Imagine a society where every individual is bound by strict rules, where creativity and difference are seen as a threat. The Dominion believed that only absolute obedience and tight control could ensure stability and prosperity. This is evident in every aspect of Dominion society, from the education system, where children are taught to be obedient citizens, to the political system, where power is concentrated in the hands of a small group of elites, and also the economic system, where all resources are controlled by the state. But it was precisely this excessive control that became the Dominion's fatal weakness. They stifled creativity, silenced dissenting voices, and created a stagnant, lifeless society. We can see this repeated throughout history. Look at the Roman Empire, a powerful force that dominated Europe for hundreds of years, but it was arrogance and complacency that led them to underestimate external enemies, and ultimately led to their downfall. Or look at the Soviet Union, a powerful nation that was once the counterbalance to the United States during the Cold War. But the state's tight control over every aspect of life led to economic stagnation and, ultimately, to its dissolution. What's the lesson here? That excessive control and complacency can be the most dangerous enemies of success. That we need to be able to listen to dissenting voices, encourage creativity, and always be ready to adapt to change. And it was this arrogance and complacency that led the Dominion to underestimate humanity. They believed that those who had been erased from history could never rise again. They didn't realize that oppression and injustice had created a simmering fire of hatred in the hearts of humanity, a fire just waiting for a chance to ignite. After consolidating power, the Dominion decided that humanity was a potential threat. They likely observed us, witnessing our rapid development in technology and military strength. Instead of seeking cooperation or peaceful coexistence, they chose a brutal and inhumane path to erase humanity from the universe. They called it the Great Purge, a systematic campaign to eliminate every trace of humanity's existence. Cities were razed, cultures were destroyed, and billions of innocent people were brutally murdered. Imagine the orphaned children, the wives who lost their husbands, the fathers who lost their children. They lost everything: family, friends, homes, and even the hope for a bright future. What the Dominion did was no different from the worst genocides in human history. We have witnessed similar things happen in the Holocaust, when millions of Jews were systematically murdered simply because they were Jewish, or in the Rwandan genocide, when hundreds of thousands of Tutsis were brutally slaughtered simply because they belonged to a different tribe. Such actions are not only crimes against people, but also crimes against the conscience of humanity. They remind us of the worst things that humans can inflict on each other, and the importance of protecting values like human rights, freedom, and justice. But even in the darkest moments, there are always rays of hope. Some were fortunate enough to survive the genocide, and they vowed never to forget what had happened. They hid in the shadows, quietly rebuilding their strength and awaiting the opportunity for revenge. What's the lesson here? That we must never forget the crimes that have happened in the past. That we must always be vigilant against signs of hatred and discrimination, and that we must always stand up for the vulnerable, the oppressed. And it was these survivors, those who carried within them the fire of hatred and the thirst for justice, who became the seeds of humanity's rise. They passed on to later generations the stories of a painful past, and vows never to repeat the mistakes of their ancestors. And from these seeds, a resilient will sprouted, a steely determination was forged, and a meticulous plan for revenge was built. After the horrific genocide, humanity seemed to have vanished from the universe, but like a small flame still smoldering beneath the ashes, our will to survive was not extinguished. The fortunate survivors sought every way to hide, to protect what remained of human civilization. They lived in harsh conditions, lacking everything. But they never gave up hope. They worked together to rebuild society, preserve valuable knowledge and skills, and quietly prepare for the day of their return. We can see similar things happen throughout history. Think of the Jews who survived the Holocaust. They lost their families, friends, homes, and even faith in humanity. But they did not let grief and loss overwhelm them. They worked together to rebuild their community, restore their economy, and contribute to the development of the world. Or think of the Vietnamese people who endured decades of war. They faced seemingly insurmountable hardships and challenges, but they did not give up. They resolutely fought, protected the independence and freedom of their nation, and rebuilt their country from the ashes. These stories show us that the human will to survive is incredibly powerful, that, even in the worst circumstances, we can still find hope, find the strength to overcome all difficulties. In post-genocide human society, leaders played a crucial role. They were the ones who inspired, motivated, and led the people through the most difficult times. They were scientists, engineers, writers, artists, and warriors who dedicated themselves to the survival of humanity. They taught future generations lessons about courage, perseverance, and solidarity. They reminded them of what was lost and their responsibility for the future of humanity. What's the lesson here? That, in the most difficult times, we need to rely on each other, overcome every challenge together, that we need to maintain our belief in ourselves and in the future, and that we must always remember the lessons from the past. to avoid repeating similar mistakes. And it was from this extraordinary resilience and will to survive that humanity gradually rose from the darkness. They developed new technologies, trained elite warriors, and built a meticulous, unforgiving plan for revenge. They prepared for the day they would return and reclaim what was lost. In the shadows, humanity not only tried to survive, but also secretly developed new technologies, weapons that could help them turn the tide against the Dominion. They didn't have abundant resources, didn't have modern laboratories, but they had something the Dominion didn't: creativity and self-reliance. Think of the exosuit, a mechanical armor that allows soldiers to enhance their strength, speed, and endurance. It wasn't a new technology, but humanity improved it to suit guerrilla warfare, turning it into a formidable weapon in close-quarters combat. Or think of the railgun, an electromagnetic gun capable of firing projectiles at supersonic speeds. It wasn't a fancy weapon, but it could pierce the Dominion's thickest armor and cause serious damage. Humanity also developed guerrilla warfare techniques, taking advantage of the terrain and harsh climate of their hiding planets to attack and deplete Dominion forces. They learned how to use improvised weapons, landmines, and surprise tactics to inflict heavy casualties on the enemy. We can see similar things happen in history. Think of the Vietnam War, when Vietnamese soldiers used rudimentary weapons and guerrilla tactics to defeat a powerful army equipped with modern technology. Or think of the guerrilla war of the Afghans against the Soviet Union, when they used rugged terrain and classic weapons to inflict heavy losses on the Soviet army. These stories show us that technology is not everything, that creativity, self-reliance, and adaptability are the most important factors to win in war. What's the lesson here? That we should not be too dependent on technology, but need to develop the skills and qualities needed to cope with challenges in life. That we need to always be creative, find new solutions, and never give up hope. And it was thanks to these technologies and tactics that humanity was able to create big surprises for the Dominion and begin to turn the tide in the war. However, victory depends not only on military strength, but also on ethical and psychological factors. As humanity began to win, a big question arose. What is the price of retribution? Can we maintain our humanity in this brutal war? Can we avoid becoming as brutal as the Dominion? Some argued that, to defeat an irreconcilable enemy, we need to use all measures, including the most brutal ones. They believed that mercy is a waste, and that only total destruction can ensure the safety of humanity. But others argued that we cannot lose our moral values, even in war. They believed that using brutal methods would only make us become like the Dominion, and that we need to uphold our humanity to build a better future. We can see similar debates in history. Think about the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Supporters argued that this action helped end the war quickly and saved millions of lives. But opponents argued that this action was a crime against humanity, and that it caused terrible consequences for innocent civilians. Or, think of the torture of prisoners in the War on Terror. Supporters argued that torture can help gather important information and prevent terrorist attacks. But opponents argued that torture is an inhumane act, and that it violates the basic values of human rights. These stories show us that war always poses difficult ethical questions, and that there are no easy answers to these questions, that we need to always weigh the consequences of our actions, and that we need to uphold our moral values. Even in the most difficult circumstances, in the war against the Dominion, humanity faced similar difficult decisions. They had to choose between using brutal methods to win and upholding their moral values. And sometimes, these choices caused fierce debates within humanity. What's the lesson here? That war is not just a battle about military power, but also a battle about ethics. That we need to always question our actions, and that we need to uphold our moral values to build a better future. And it was thanks to these debates that humanity was able to maintain its humanity in the war against the Dominion. They did not become as brutal as the Dominion, but upheld their moral values and built a better society after the war. The rise of humanity dealt a heavy blow to the spirit of the Dominion. Humanity's successive victories, surprise attacks, and massive damage shook the people's belief in the superiority and invincibility of the Empire. The Dominion's resources were dwindling, the economy collapsing, and society was falling into chaos. soldiers deserting, people rebelling, and planets seceding created a full-blown crisis, threatening the survival of the empire. We can see similar things happen throughout history. Think of the fall of the Roman Empire, constant wars, economic decline, and the invasion of barbarian tribes weakened the empire from within and ultimately led to its downfall. Or think of the dissolution of the Soviet Union, economic problems, the dissatisfaction of the people, and the rise of nationalism weakened the state from within and ultimately led to its disintegration. These stories show us that the collapse of an empire comes not only from external attacks, but also from internal problems, that injustice, oppression, and inflexibility can weaken a society from within and make it vulnerable to attacks from the outside. In the case of the Dominion, arrogance and complacency led them to fail to recognize their internal problems. They were too focused on maintaining power and control, without paying attention to the needs and aspirations of the people. What's the lesson here? That a society can only survive and thrive sustainably when it is based on fairness, respect, and flexibility. That we need to always listen to the voices of the people, meet their needs, and be ready to change to adapt to new challenges. And it was these mistakes that made the Dominion vulnerable to the rise of humanity. Successive attacks, internal rebellions, and economic decline weakened the empire and created an opportunity for humanity to win the final victory. After the Dominion fell, the biggest question asked was, how would justice be served? Would humanity repeat the mistakes of its enemy and take revenge blindly? Or would they find a way to build a fair and transparent justice system to ensure that similar crimes would never happen again? Some argued that those who committed genocide needed to be punished in the strictest way. They believed that only just punishment could bring comfort to those who had lost loved ones and prevent similar actions in the future. But others argued that revenge would only perpetuate the cycle of violence, and that we need to find ways to forgive and reconcile to build a better future. They believed that only forgiveness and reconciliation could heal the wounds of the heart and bring peace to society. We can see similar debates in history. Think of the Nuremberg trials, where Nazi war criminals were tried after World War II. These trials caused much controversy about whether those who committed genocide deserved a fair trial. Or think of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, where those who committed crimes during apartheid were given the opportunity to confess and apologize in exchange for forgiveness. This commission caused much controversy about whether forgiveness could replace justice. These stories show us that administering justice after a war is always a complex and difficult process, that there are no easy answers to the questions of guilt, punishment, forgiveness, and reconciliation. In the case of the Dominion, humanity decided to establish an international court to try those who committed genocide. These trials were conducted fairly and transparently, and those convicted received just punishments. Humanity also decided to forgive the innocent Dominion citizens, those who were not involved in the genocidal crimes. They provided humanitarian aid, helped these people rebuild their lives and integrate into the new society. What's the lesson here? That justice is not just about punishment, but also about fairness, transparency, and forgiveness. That we need to find a balance between punishing the guilty and protecting the innocent. And it was thanks to these decisions that humanity was able to build a new society based on justice and peace. They did not repeat the mistakes of the Dominion, but created a better world for everyone. After the Dominion fell, a new era began. Humanity and other races in the galaxy worked together to rebuild the planets devastated by war and create new communities based on fairness, freedom, and mutual respect. However, the road to peace and prosperity was not easy. The remnants of the Dominion were still there, the hatred still smoldered, and new challenges constantly arose. We can see similar things happen after every war. Think of Europe after World War II. Nations that had once been enemies had to overcome hatreds and divisions to build a strong economic and political alliance together. Or think of Vietnam after the war. The country faced enormous economic, social, and political difficulties, but resolutely overcame every challenge and rose to become one of the fastest-growing countries in the region. These stories show us that building peace and prosperity after war is a long and arduous process, that we need to have patience, understanding, and cooperation to overcome every difficulty. In the post-Dominion galaxy, humanity played an important role in promoting peace and stability. They shared their knowledge and experience, provided humanitarian aid, and helped other races build democratic and fair institutions. What's the lesson here? That peace and prosperity are not things that come naturally. That we need to work hard, struggle tirelessly to protect and build them. And the story of humanity's rise, from the oppressed to the peacemakers, is a great source of inspiration for all of us. It shows us that, even in the darkest moments, we can still find hope and build a better future. And so, the story of humanity's rise comes to an end. A story about those who lost everything, but did not give up hope. A story about revenge, but also about forgiveness and reconciliation. A story about war, but also about peace and prosperity. But above all, this is a story about humanity, about the power of will, the ability to overcome every difficulty, and the desire to build a better world. The lessons we can learn from this story are invaluable. We have learned that resilience and creativity can help us win even when faced with the biggest challenges. We have learned that justice and forgiveness need to go hand in hand to heal the wounds of war. And we have learned that peace and prosperity are not obvious things, but are achievements that need to be protected and built constantly. What's the lesson here? That we have the power to change the world, if we have enough faith, perseverance, and solidarity. So bring these lessons into your life. Stand up against injustice, protect the vulnerable, and build communities based on fairness, freedom, and mutual respect. Because the future of the world is in our hands. And if we can learn from the mistakes of the past, we can build a brighter future for everyone.